Hi everyone, George here, the editor of the Sales Transformation Podcast. This week we're taking a look back at some of the highlights from Q1 of 2025. Enjoy the clips.
You also mentioned something that it might be quite controversial, especially if you're in sales, discussing KPIs and I guess the performance-related commission.
Yeah.
So often, I think people are in sales because they can earn a paycheck, and it's and you can earn a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
And the upside of what you can earn is, I think, very attractive.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see or hear if other people echo what Phil has just said around fixing salespeople's salary or having, or does sales always need that sort of purse string incentive to, it's the whole carrot and stick, isn't it?
Is
that what motivates you?
It is controversial. And I was at a research event hosted by the Warwick Business School in early December, where some of the research studies conducted by some of the academics there specifically looked at this concept of levers and, to what extent do financial incentives actually motivate salespeople? And I know that I was speaking in the minority then about this idea that, maybe it's not an individual kind of quota achievement that's important, but maybe it's a company-wide, maybe there could be different ways of incentivizing individuals to work based on KPIs that are broader than just what individuals do. But it's going to be debated forever, this one, I think. I've sort of gone round in circles on it. But at the end of the day, I mean, the premise is that if you put your customer first in all of your thinking, and then work back, well, what do we need to do in order to service our clients in the most ethical, the most professional way? And then ask yourself the question, what remuneration system do we need to have that's actually going to build that? Because if we're more successful with our customers, we'll all be more successful. I think that's probably the way to go about setting the systems in place to actually drive performance. But no, I'm. I know this is
open for debate,
but it's for debate. Yeah. But I'm. I think that's what we need. We need debate. We need talk about it. And I know that I've got one voice, but there are many others that will think differently to me. But
I saw just early on today just a fascinating article about NVIDIA and the employees that work there. A huge proportion of them have earned a phenomenal amount of money. But they are expected to work 7 days a week, and they're under a huge amount of pressure. But the reason why they stay is because of the financial incentives. Anyway, open to that debate. That's quite interesting.
The second leading characteristic I came across was the player coach. So global account managers have got a long virtual or supporting team around them that they know how to delegate and allocate resources to make sure they get the best out of people and make sure they can stretch across the whole account. But they also know at critical times at what points to roll up their sleeves and get involved themselves. Maybe it's chasing through that technical support ticket so the customer can resolve the issue, or going line by line through the contract or the numbers just to make sure that the team have got the right things going on. You need to balance where you're going to lead and where you're actually going to get involved with the team. But there's also a scale up, scale down perspective I put to player coach. And that's an ability. The greatest global account managers had the ability to speak both confidently and as a peer to the C-level executives, as well as to the developers and architects down the bottom. And they have a valuable conversation at each level, and they change the way in which they talk to those executives at each level and those people involved at each level. The person that comes to mind for me on this, and it's probably one of my favorite TV shows, is Band of Brothers. It came out a long time ago, but if you think about Captain Dick Winters, played by Damian Lewis, he really embodies that player coach. He knew, and he was uncomfortable to initially do so, but when he would stand back and be able to coordinate the battlefield with the staff officers, but also when to step in and get engaged with his soldiers. I remember when, in one of the last episodes, when they were doing demobilizing the soldiers, and the soldiers one by one were leaving Germany to go back to the US. One of the soldiers salutes and says goodbye to him. And he says, "No, you're a soldier now. My name's Dick." And that was it. And so it was like he really understood his team and knew how to work with them.
It's so much about developing the confidence to actually go and have those conversations and, be in a room full of C-suite and feel like you're meant to be there. And I feel like that's what the kind of theory side of the apprenticeship has given me in terms of skills, is that theory behind, okay, why do people make, buying decisions? What allows people to trust you? So I think that side of things has really developed my skill set into kind of not being really shy walking into a room, feeling like you know enough to be there, but also how to cope with situations, maybe not going your way, how to kind of analyze a room and earn trust quickly. And I think pivotal moment for me was getting my own customers to manage. I feel like that's really kind of when it becomes quite real. It's like, oh, okay, I'm the one managing the relationship. I'm the one dealing with, certain deals and projects. And I think that was a really big moment to show, okay, now it's time to really put in practice everything that you've learned through the last few years and almost kind of prove it. So yeah, that was my big pivotal moment.
I spoke to a whole bunch of CXOs, and I asked them all a very simple question. I said, can you think of the best person you've ever worked with from the supplier side in your entire career? And I spoke to CXOs at JP Morgan, Amex, BP, Sainsbury's, Boots, a whole bunch of people, hundreds of millions in spend per year, some of them billions in spend. And they all immediately thought of someone. And sometimes it was from many years ago, sometimes more recent. And we just talked through what made them so special versus the average or everybody else. And this is one quote I've pulled out, but it's very typical. I did thematic analysis, so there's a lot of themes that were very similar to this. And it's what impressed me about him was the diligence with which he researched and talked to a lot of my direct reports and a lot of other people in the business before he came to me with some ideas about making things better, even before I had even thought that perhaps I had a problem. So here is an individual I was already beginning to trust, the magic word, and I felt was someone I would listen to. So what we're trying to do in step 2 is to be able to gather enough insight for them to perceive you in that way, obviously. So again, there's 2 parts to this. Research is the obvious stuff that I think we're all pretty familiar with, but we uncovered a huge amount of insight here around what the CEO was talking about from YouTube videos and different podcasts, and what some new guys were talking about their strategy and the recruitment and where they were, events they were talking at, etc. So all that analysis was pulled and done. But this is something I think deserves particular focus, which I call intelligence gathering in the book. And it's a differentiator, I would say, and even like a superpower in how we're able to build knowledge, and back to the quote, to position ourselves as someone that has done that extra work and been able to present a different perspective on what might be ordinarily available.
how do you think employers perceive the impact of apprentices within their org?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably a question for them, to be honest, how they would perceive it. What I can say from our perspective is that, we see how our apprentices going through the program, how they progress, how they get promoted into that next role in the organisation. I don't have statistics for that, but retention also is really strong. We see that through the program and beyond. We stay in touch with our alumni so we can see that where they're staying and where they're developing themselves. And our employers, our customers, provide us with apprentices. They entrust their apprentices to us year on year. So they're clearly seeing the benefits if they are coming back and allowing us to take their apprentices through the program. And I think the other thing they see, obviously we work very closely with the employers in terms of making sure they understand the program and the expectations on both sides and everything that the apprentices are going to go through. And we talk to them about the projects, and I'm sure the apprentices do. They're negotiated projects at the end of each year, where they've got that opportunity to really come up with something innovative and impactful for the organisation. And that can be through, areas to develop, areas in improvement, all through action research that they can take to the employer and to the wider business. So I think that's a really good way for them to understand the impact.
A large sports fashion brand, international in stature, based in Germany, which probably again narrows it down. And it goes back to what we were saying about AI. Yeah, they had profiled their business. They had a very, very clear view of what they wanted, and they were going out to look at an RFP, and we got wind of it. They were looking to go for the RFP. We did all of the good stuff that I'm sure you do on a regular basis. We looked at, we mapped the business. So what was the drivers within those businesses? We stakeholder mapped it. We understood multiple areas of where they wanted to be. We're fortunate in the fact that we supply that market. We have most of the major sports fashion brands under our umbrella. So we knew where the market was going. And then we engaged with them. We engaged with multiple stakeholders, looked at sustainability managers, procurement, finance teams, and so forth. So we had a very good understanding of their business at this point. And then we were trying to shape the RFP, but we just could not, at the time, change their mindset of what they wanted. So they went for an RFP which defined something which we just absolutely convinced that wasn't right for them. And going back to some of your values, that sort of tenacious audacity of being able to stick to your guns and tell them that that's not what they should be doing. So we put a really strong pitch together with a completely different viewpoint as to what we felt they needed, which was quite brave. And we actually said, we're not going to actually quote for what you wanted to. Let's have a continued dialogue. And as a result, they took us to one side of the RFP and said, right, we'll continue to run the RFP because that's what we want. But we're quite interested in what you're talking about. And then we had multiple stakeholder engagement as to, okay, what would it look like in our world if we delivered this through? And in the end, we were literally in a bidding of one. It was just literally us pitching this idea. And in the end, we convinced them that that was the right thing to do, and we got awarded the business.
So if we start to talk about relationship selling, you've got a quantity, you've got a number, you've got how extensive is the network, then you've got the quality. And I think there is a type of salesperson that has existed, which is sort of based on relational aspects. It's, they're very easy to talk to. They're not particularly in the challenger work, not particularly challenging. They don't bring sort of fresh insight. So I think that when we talk about relationship selling in the context of the network effect, we're talking about the depth and the breadth of relationships you have within your global accounts. And then you've got what do you do with the relationships? How do you use those relationships to kind of bring value, both to the client and to your own business? Julia, I don't know if you've got a point of view on that from your experience and some of the challenges you face in dealing with your global accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so it goes back to the value conversation, right? So you walking into a new customer, particularly a global customer, and if you're not able to establish value with that first contact that you have with that customer. I think that's the challenge that you'll face. The right thing is to come in, obviously show the value to that customer, and that customer will then be your, if we can put it, facilitate the internal buy-in and help you up the value chain up to the levels that you need to go, and down that chain as well. So it's creating the value. And how do you create that value? You've got to do your insights, right? You've got to understand that customer business challenge in detail. You've got to, look at it from a 360 perspective. What are the KPIs for that particular individual that you're talking to? What is important to them? How do you help them sort of move themselves up into the chain, and look good to the executives? So if you're able to create that value for that individual, they will more easily be able to take you up into the opportunity and expand that for you across relationships.
I think Consalia is unique, what I've seen as of now, because I knew that I was going to be finding something unique between these opportunities and combination between synergies between the business school and the consulting and the digital, but also on the way that Consalia is doing the business school and the programs. It's something very unique, because people normally come and, okay, this is my book, this is the process, you have to follow, that's it. And we work differently, right? So we really give the tools and the toolbox to the students in a way they can find their way. And that's very important, because not every company is the same, not every department is the same. And that's the best way to make these programs a success. So I believe that this jointly with the digital and the consulting, I think it will be fantastic, because we can interact between both things. So so the way we do all this business consulting, the way we can do the synergy between both. That's fantastic. But also a very great thing I found is the team, how the team is working, how supportive. Right, so you are really working with. We are really working with corporates and corporate sector, but also with the universities, public sector, etc. So we have this kind of mix, but within the team is like a small entrepreneurship spirit. That is what is growing. So I love this thing, which is the one that I started to learn when I started Explorer, right? Because when you are in the corporate world, it's like you're corporate.
Yeah.
So very hierarchical organizations, then you have the department, you have to have a lot of politics. Here is nothing about that. Here is about how we drive the best value to the customer, no matter if it's one way or the other, and be open to be innovative and challenge the team. And I love this, because I like challenges. Everyone was telling me it's not going to be possible to find a consumer electronics business selling outside, blah blah. We did it. Everyone was saying me, you're not going to be able to import Spanish deli into the UK. We've done it. So I believe that this team has the same DNA.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to add value to the team and trigger some potential opportunities.
What do you think the level of importance is for using silence in questioning and communicate? Because a lot of this was based on 0.2 seconds to respond, 0.7. What level of impact do you think this plays, particularly when interacting with clients? Because as salespeople, we often find that we're told to use silence appropriately. What level of influence do you think that has on a customer? And do you think that improves their willingness, if I was to use that word, to respond and engage with us?
Yes, a great question, actually, because silence... Well, first thing, silence is never really silence, because silence is not nothing. It's not inert. We don't switch off for 2 seconds and then we're back on kind of thing. It's not a nothing thing. So silence, first of all, has to be almost like actively produced and maintained, and it's quite hard to maintain a long silence. So some of those examples that you saw, I think the longest one was 7 seconds or something. I think the longest one I've ever recorded was 11.2 in a police interview, where the suspect just really didn't want to answer the question, so they waited for 11.2 seconds, and then a different version of the question came out. But so I think there's lots and lots of research in my field on what silence is doing, and the first thing to think about is it really silence, or are people actually sort of filling it with or gaze or looking or think or showing that they're doing things in apparently that silence. So I think a lot of what we imagine is happening in a silence isn't really what's going on in a silence. Long silences start actually measurably much shorter than we think. So 2 seconds is huge. 4 seconds is excruciating. Just one very quick story. I actually gave a talk a few years ago, and Charlie State, the BBC journalist, was the host. And I did something a bit like this. And then he said that he asked a very similar question to you, and said he'd interviewed Lady Gaga. You can go and YouTube this as well. And he asked her a question about Trump. It was 2016, I think this was. And she just stayed silent. And he said that the silence was so excruciating that when the BBC broadcast the version of the interview, they actually chopped 8 seconds of it out because it was so long that they thought we just can't put viewers through it, which I thought was actually kind of fascinating. So yeah, silence is very powerful, but it's doing a whole bunch of different things.
Can I ask you a question about sort of intelligence analysts? You mentioned them before, and how they've got so much data they have to kind of sift through. What qualities do you think that makes a great intelligence? I don't know if analyst is the right word, or an intelligence person. What skills would they have that make them really good at what they do?
Without doubt, a huge amount of patience with their own clients. So an intelligence analyst will have multimedia streams of information coming in 24/7, and they are, expected to generate intelligence summaries for the senior decision makers, and they have a finite time to do this. Obviously, information has most of it has a good best before date. The problem they face is they need to their analysis to be as comprehensive and complete and wide as possible, but at the same time it needs to be understood in a short amount of time by someone who's very, very busy, and matching that input to output demand is a significant problem. So it can be quite unsatisfying gaining a view of a situation and then having to stop before you feel you've really understood the essence of the problem, and you've got to report in language which somebody who is less of an expert in the area than you are will understand. On to the next thing. So it requires a lot of patience to be able to deal with the intelligence customer. And this came out of the Butler report particularly, which is what I base a lot of my work on. If you've got lots of information and it's all the right information, how can you then make the wrong decision? Well, the process was driven by the client who was demanding information. All of saying, don't give me that, maybe this, maybe the other. Will it or won't it? Of course, the intelligence analyst, their job is to tell the truth, not to say what their client wants to hear.
Right.
Senior and fundamentally bullied the analyst into something which the client wanted to hear but wasn't fundamentally true. So there was again an awkward power relationship in there which skewed the whole process.
You've just given me a whole sort of another sort of train of thought, which is around the relationship of salespeople with their sales managers. Because typically what would happen is the managers are under huge pressure to achieve quarter end kind of results. They may be managing a team of 20, 30 people. Those managers then have to report to the board, on how much business they're going to be able to close this next quarter, because it's get fed through into quarter end, sometimes PLC type announcements. And there's a huge amount of time and activity goes into the process of briefing up to, you can imagine, you start off with a salesperson and a sales manager, then a regional sales manager, then a national sales manager, then maybe up to the CEO kind of level. And there's so much time is spent, and the difference between what we think is going to come in the next quarter, what we hope will come in the next quarter, what are we going to, and the difference between what we are going to commit to versus what our stretch goal might be. So this kind of pressure you often see coming through the system. Your conversation about power is quite interesting here, wanting to give the managers the data that will make them look good when they are presenting to their managers.
Indeed.
And how you might inflate or skew, the way in which you talk about a particular deal. It's really quite a complicated process. And if you it has a ripple effect of not only you get salespeople withholding deals sometimes that they don't want to talk about because they know it'll come under high scrutiny, by the powers that be. But it's something they can pull out of the bag, at short notice if it comes through and then it's good. And they don't want to get too much interference from senior management in that particular deal. But it goes down to a sort of game that the salespeople play with the managers, but it's also something that can affect in a negative way conversations with customers, because if there's so much pressure being put on positive or negative intelligence going up to management about how much we predict we're going to do by the end of the quarter, that it can influence perhaps slightly unscrupulous, manipulative activities going on with the customer, in order to try and get a deal across the line.
Yes.
It's just really interesting. You talk about the ethics of exaggeration, and you've got the ethics of actually not telling any, something completely hidden. So it's the opposite.
If I know something and I don't tell you, is that strictly deception?
Yeah.
It's a tough call.
I was really struck at your GST event where a couple of people in the audience said that they'd had experience of pretty high value, high complex procurements being made with no interaction. Yeah, surface. And I really found that fascinating. I've thought about that a lot. I suppose where I'm on that is two things. One is, yes, there is so much information out there. Now, if you're looking to buy something, there's lots and lots of information.
Yeah.
But almost so much that you often need to speak to someone to help you to make sense of it and to guide you through it.
Yeah.
Second thing is, it's words that you can read. Surely you want to question, probe, put someone's feet to the fire and find out if the fine promises they're making hold true. And then the third reason why I would think you would want to talk to someone is, if something was to go wrong, I would not want to be the person standing in front of the CEO and said, well, no, I never even actually spoke to him. Just follow the information I get. It would not be a comfortable place. And I was saying earlier how a lot of sectors are quite mature now. So there's a lot of very high quality organisations out there, all of whom have a great product, a solution, service, whatever it might be. So how do you differentiate? Well, price could be one. But the other way tends to be cultural fit, which is a bit of a nebulous term. It can always mean whatever you want it to mean. Yeah. But I suppose at its heart is, it's people we can do business with. We like them, we trust them that they're going to resolve things if things don't go well, and so on. Now, if we come back to where we started on the question, does this new digital age mean that it changes everything we've been talking about with the interaction with suppliers? I actually don't think it does. I think 10, 20 years ago, when there was less information available digitally, you needed to speak to salespeople to find out about their solutions and products. So you had to. That was your main reason for wanting to do it. In today's age, you still want to speak to them and still require that trust, but for slightly different reasons. Not because you don't have enough information, it's almost you've got too much. And my personal belief is, and certainly from what I see with my own stakeholders when I've been working in mid-sized organisations, is you absolutely want to get to know them, to be able to question them about their solutions and all the promises they've been making. And also, goes back to what I said earlier about customer of choice, if I'm not going to be your largest client, I want to know you, I want you to know us, to make sure that we're absolutely the right fit for you and that you're going to be fighting my corner. All of which means I think you ought to have as much interaction with salespeople as ever.